Hey, Cookies here. We're going to take a look at a Resto Shaman log on Sludgefist Heroic, and I'm just going to show you guys what I would do going through a log and trying to find out, am I playing properly, or is someone in my guild, playing properly and stuff like that as a Resto Shaman. So the first thing we want to check is, I think the most important thing is definitely Cloudburst usage. So making sure that Cloudburst is being used, first of all, and then second, that it is being fed into properly with heals. So we're just going to go to cast here at the top, go to the Shaman we want to look at, and go to Cloudburst Totem. And what we want to do here is see each Cloudburst, and for one, we have Cloudburst is a 30-second cooldown. So we should have a Cloudburst pretty much every 30 seconds. It's not going to be perfect, but it should be spaced out to the point where you're getting one just about every 30 seconds, because you want to make sure that you're not just holding charges. So right off the bat, we can already see a few problems. The first one is that our Shaman does not use, and for instance, this is just someone in my guild for reference, so I'm just kind of using them as an example. So Beetobandit here does not use Cloudburst at all within the first 45 seconds of the fight. And this is because the damage profile is pretty low until this minute mark. But there are a few, if we go to, real quick, we'll just close out of this and go to damage taken. We're going to switch taken by friendly to taken from ability. And then we're going to look at Colossal Roar and Destructive Impact, which are the two major damage abilities in this fight. And then now we can go back to cast and do the same thing, go to Beastoid, and then we're looking at Cloudburst Totem. And now we can see there's a Colossal Roar that happens at 30 seconds, so there should be a Cloudburst that lines up with this to help heal it, because there's no reason not to, since there's no, you're holding two charges here this whole time. But we can look at this Cloudburst that's being used for the Destructive Impact, so we'll take a look at that, and I'll show you guys how to actually, see if the Cloudburst is getting the proper usage and healing the group enough. So we'll just zoom into this. And the first thing is Cloudburst lasts, 15 seconds on the ground. So typically you want your Cloudburst dropped 15 seconds before the damage happens to the raid. It's not always going to be perfect, and one of the good parts about Cloudburst is that you can just simply reactivate the button and get the healing out of it on demand. So worst case is you drop it early, or drop it late rather. You never want to drop it early, because if you drop it earlier than 15 seconds before the boss ability, it will just heal the group and overheal them before the damage happens, and then the damage will happen to the raid. But if you happen to drop it, 5, even 10 seconds late, when the damage is about to happen, you still get a little bit of healing into that damage rather than none at all. So worst case, press it late, never press it early, but I would say about 10 to 15 seconds is always your goal for when you want to be dropping Cloudburst. So for here, for instance, we take the damage at 58 seconds, and the Cloudburst is at 48, so that's 10 seconds before the damage happens. That's totally fine. It would have been best to drop it here at 45 seconds, but again, doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, so this is fine. And now we can see what are we actually feeding into it. So we're going to go to the timelines here, and then scroll down, and we can track when Cloudburst was dropped. So we're just going to look for Cloudburst, and where is it? Here it is. Cool. So there's a couple things that we're looking for when dropping a Cloudburst totem. The first major thing is when going into a Cloudburst totem, you want to make sure that both your Riptide charges, if you have Echo of the Elements, are used up, and that you just put down Healing Rain on the group, and it has that full duration cooldown waiting to be used again. So, and the reason we do this is because the heal over time from these abilities, Riptide and Healing Rain, are going to feed into our Cloudburst totem, even if we put them down before putting the Cloudburst down. So if you, set Cloudburst totem down, then press Healing Rain, then press 2 Riptides, it's pretty much doing the exact same amount of healing into the Cloudburst totem as if you just use those abilities before the Cloudburst and let their heal over time effects carry into the Cloudburst totem. So it saves us from those 3 globals, essentially, and we're adding spells into our Cloudburst and extending its, duration, essentially, because we're getting free time into the Cloudburst before it's even dropped. So the first thing is we see Healing Rain dropped, we see a Riptide, but we do not see our second Riptide, so that's our first mistake, is there should be 2 Riptides here. And then the other thing is we know, we're trying to plan around dropping Cloudburst, so we should know, especially doing a few pulls, that I'm going to drop my Cloudburst at 48 seconds, because that's when it lines up with the first boss ability or the first charge or something like that. So at, building up to 48 seconds, at about that 40-second mark, I'm going to start thinking, okay, I need to save Healing Rain, I need to save Riptide, and now I'm going to drop them right here at this, 43-second mark, so it should go, Riptide, Riptide, Healing Rain, Cloudburst. You always want to line it up like that, and it should always be using your Riptide charges, and then Healing Rain, and then Cloudburst. You shouldn't have, this Unleash Life, and then this Healing Wave, and then the Cloudburst. It should always be Riptide, Riptide, Healing Rain, Cloudburst. Because then we see the Cloudburst is dropped, and then we throw in a Riptide, which is, again, it's a wasted GCD. We could have just used this Riptide right before dropping the Cloudburst, and it would basically be doing the same healing. And now we spend another global on using an Earth Shield on the tank, and this is a problem, because now we still have yet to feed anything valuable into the Cloudburst that couldn't have just been fed in before the Cloudburst. And then we have a Healing Rain, which is canceled, and this is, again, if we're dropping this Healing Rain, that's another spell that could have just been dropped right here at the start, and then we wouldn't have to be worrying about refreshing Healing Rain during our Cloudburst. And then we have another Riptide, because now we've fallen behind, and we're doing all these other things to try to upkeep. And then we have the Cloudburst. I guess I'll see the timeline for the Cloudburst detonation, but here we have... Then we finally have a Chain Heal, which gets maybe fed into the Cloudburst, but the damage has already happened, because it happened at 58, and this Chain Heal comes out at 60. So there's our Cloudburst right there. We got... a Riptide, a canceled Healing Rain, so we didn't even get another Healing Rain, and a Riptide. So we got 2 Riptides in our Cloudburst. So that is, that is a very poor usage of Cloudburst, because what we want is to use all those heal over time effects before dropping the Cloudburst, drop the Cloudburst, then we can just spam chain heals, or use our legendary with our Necrolord ability, and get a big healing wave out that cleaves the whole group, things like that. We want these big, heavy AoE mana dump abilities going into the group when we have Cloudburst down, so that we're really feeding into that totem and having it be a really, really potent, powerful heal once it pops off at this 58 mark when the group takes damage. So then we can look at... another thing is Unleash Life. If you're running Unleash Life, you always want to use this during Cloudburst if you can. I mean, obviously the cooldown's a lot shorter than Cloudburst, so you use it in between and not during Cloudburst sometimes, but you want to be trying to fit your Unleash Life into your Cloudburst window, because that could just be an Unleash Life Chain Heal or an Unleash Life, Healing Wave or whatever that's empowered by your Necrolord ability to feed that much extra healing into the Cloudburst, because the additional healing from Unleash Life will help benefit the Cloudburst totem. And that's pretty much what Shaman is all about, is these huge Cloudburst totems that just save the raid when they take damage. So we looked at the first one. That's the big picture explaining everything. So let's go ahead and look at the next one. So the next thing we see here is we don't drop another Cloudburst here in the middle. So that's definitely another mistake. We should always be dropping a Cloudburst for every major ability, which these major abilities happen 1 minute and 15 seconds apart. We have the Destructive Impact, but we can fit, it's a minute and 15 seconds, that's 2.5 Cloudburst charges, and we only need 1 for each one, so we should be fitting a Cloudburst in the middle for something else. And what's better than Colossal Roar? Pretty much nothing. So we should be finding a Destructive Impact, and then a Colossal Roar. And there's always a Destructive Impact, or there's always a Colossal Roar right after the boss hits a pillar, once he's done being stunned. So we wouldn't want to do that one for a Cloudburst, because we already have that Cloudburst going into, the Destructive Impact. So we should always find the second one. So we should do, there should be a Cloudburst here for this Colossal Roar, and then a Cloudburst for this Impact, and then a Cloudburst for this Roar, and then a cloudburst for this impact. So you're always doing the roar that happens before the impact happens. And that should always be the plan. So like these cloudbursts right here, these seem lined up, but this one looks like it was cast a little bit late. This one looks good right here as an example for a roar one, and we'll take a look at that in a second. So first we're going to look at this next impact cloudburst and see how we did. So we'll go ahead and first thing, timing 155, damage happens at 209. That is 14 seconds before the damage takes, or before the group takes damage. And that's actually perfect. This is 14 seconds before the damage is dealt to the raid. So that is pretty much flawless. If we would have cast it a second earlier, we probably would have missed all that healing on the group. So we do have to be careful with that, but this is really good timing. This is like, the A+ timing that we're looking for. That's really ideal as long as we don't mess it up and do it too early. So now we'll go find the cloudburst. And again, what are we looking for? We're looking for that double Riptide into Healing Rain before we drop Cloudburst. And another spell we should be using that I will mention is if we're using Wellspring, this should be also going into our Cloudburst totem because it helps feed into it. But we will go ahead and look at the other things. So we have one Riptide, then we have a Chain Heal, then we have a Healing Rain, then we have Riptide. Or then we have a Cloudburst, sorry. That actually is really good. What we should be doing is this Chain Heal should just be replaced by a Riptide. And we can see one was cast back here, but this definitely comes back off cooldown by this time. So we should have these two Riptides happen right here and just cancel this Chain Heal and not do it, and then have the Healing Rain, and then into the Cloudburst. That's good. And then we immediately go into a Chain Heal, which this is fine. Usually by the time that you've dropped a Riptide and another Riptide and then a Healing Rain and then your Cloudburst, you're probably going to have time to use another Riptide, especially with our legendary if we're using the Riptide legendary, the Primal Tidal Core. We should be casting as many Riptides as possible even once we are in our Cloudburst totem, but that's the whole point of casting it before the Cloudburst, is so that we get as much uptime and as many Riptides out as possible over the duration of our Cloudburst without having to spend the entire Cloudburst spamming like three Riptides. So we have a Chain Heal, and then we have a canceled Chain Heal. And this is where we should be using Unleash Life, but again, we use it before we drop our Cloudburst, so that does not help at all. We want to save that for our Cloudburst if it's this close. And this one actually might be 15-second recharge. So yeah, this actually would have been recharged in the middle of our Cloudburst, which it looks like right here. But I think we could have even used it back here a little bit more, because the cooldown should have been back at about 120 if I'm not mistaken. So it's a 15-second cooldown at 105, then yeah, it should be available at about 120. So this should be a Unleash Life into a Chain Heal here. And then the second Chain Heal should still be cast, but I think we were obviously dodging something, so that's why it didn't get cast. Then we have our Riptides, and we should also be meshing, again, our legendary plus Covenant ability and all that stuff into our Cloudburst. Like, we want to be fitting all of those big potent AoE heals into our Cloudburst. So, and we also want to fit more than one Chain Heal. Cloudburst should have, as many Chain Heals and those big AoE heals as possible. And then, so yeah, all we really get out of this Cloudburst is one Chain Heal, two Riptides, and an Unleash Life with Riptide, which this should be an Unleash Life and a Chain Heal for sure. And then the last thing is your Healing Rain when you cast it at the beginning here, and then drop your Cloudburst, because Healing Rain has, I believe, a 10-second duration. Yeah, 10-second duration, 10-second cooldown. When you press it here and then press Cloudburst, because Cloudburst has a 15-second duration, you're going to want to use that another Healing Rain at the very end of your Cloudburst before it expires. So there should always be, again, that pattern we're looking for is two Riptides, a Healing Rain before the Cloudburst, and then in the Cloudburst window, as many of those big OP, like potent AoE heals that we have, and then another Healing Rain at the very end, like towards the back end of the Cloudburst. So this is still like a pretty weak Cloudburst totem. And to help you guys understand how to look at like how much healing are these Cloudbursts doing, like, how do I know a good Cloudburst from a bad one? Just by looking at these timelines. And this is by using WoW Analyzer, which is it's just wowanalyzer.com, and all you do is you just link your log. So we'll just take this, this Sludgefist log that we have, and then we'll just link it in here. And now we can look at the same poll, and what we'll do is we will go to, first of all, WoW Analyzer will tell you like things that you could be improving on. And this is by far the most important thing to look at, is you come in here and you go, oh, I'm not casting Primordial Wave at all. That is a huge, huge issue. I am not using Earthen Wall Totem on cooldown. That is a huge issue. Sorry, not I, but I'm saying like this is, you know, because this is not my log, but, and we're not using Cloudburst like we saw in the log. We're not casting Cloudburst as often as we could be, and this is telling us that. So the first thing to really focus on is use WoW Analyzer to see what you can be casting more, and then, you know, adjust your UI or whatever you need to do to help make that happen. And then to go back on the topic of what we were talking about is these Cloudbursts. So you can hit cooldowns here, and now this does have the downside of not showing you the precast, which that's why I like using Warcraft logs, is to see what we were casting before the Cloudburst totem, because that's a very important sequence. But we can see here, like, so the ideal setup is going to be something like seeing Wellspring, seeing a couple chain heals, and then seeing like Riptides and Healing Rains at the back end of the Cloudburst totem. That's the whole like goal that we're looking for. And then we can see how much healing these did, how much overhealing, all these things. And you want, like, the bigger they are, you know, the better. And you find like a Cloudburst that you did really well on, and then you see how much healing you were doing on that one, and that should be like what you're aiming for every time. And we can still use WoW Analyzer if you guys prefer it to see what we were doing in the Cloudburst. You just go to the timeline here, and it's the exact same thing as like the cast sequence timeline and Warcraft logs. And we can see like here's our Cloudburst totem here, here's the spells we cast before. So see all this wasted time, like we could have done Riptide, Healing Rain, Cloudburst, rather than Healing Rain, Cloudburst, and now our Healing Rain's off cooldown again, and we should be casting it. So using WoW Analyzer, Warcraft logs, all that stuff to check your Cloudburst totem. I know this was basically just a talk fully about Cloudburst totem for 17 minutes, so hopefully that was still helpful, and we'll go over some other Shaman logs. I do want to kind of cut this video now, but we will go over some other Shaman related stuff in the future and other healer stuff, so hopefully this was helpful. Thank you guys for watching, and have a good one.